All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Weekly Dive, episode number 2. I'm your host, Hayden, along with...
Clay. We took a little bit of a break. I know we just started on episode 1, but Hayden wasn't feeling too good and Georgia lost, so
It's my fault.
yeah, it's a big impact on Hayden, so it takes a big impact on him. So we're gonna kick back with this one, episode 2 on Black Sox scandal for you guys today.
Yep, episode number 2, like you said, Black Sox scandal. But before we hop into it, just a little bit of talk. How was your week this week?
My week was good. How was your
Well,
week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. My last 2 weeks were pretty good. It was a little bit of a drag, but it's Christmas time, so yeah. Hope everybody gets what they want, so it'll be good. Christmas comes up in 2 weeks, I believe.
Like
Next week.
9 days.
Yeah, 9 days, something like that.
What is today?
Yeah, what is today?
It is December 14th, so we
December
got 11
14th.
days.
Okay.
So 11 days until Christmas, which is wild to think about. It's already that time of the year, about to be 2020 coming up soon, end of the decade.
No more teens. No more teens.
Our childhood's gone.
It's a big milestone. Okay,
But-
so let's jump into this. So because we got some awesome information for you guys today, and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. So here we go, guys.
All right, so to get into it, the Black Sox scandal, a story of the I put 2019.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Hayden's a little sick, guys. So if his
Yeah.
information's a little off, it's because he's been
I've been
coughing his
sick
head off.
the past
and
2 weeks.
He's using a full roll of toilet paper from my house to blow his nose because he can't handle
Okay,
it.
so not the 2019 Chicago White Sox, but the 1919 Chicago White Sox, and it revolves around their 1919 World Series. It's a story that's debated to this day and is a big part of the early times of professional baseball. The stories and accounts around the situation can differ. So yeah, that's the intro to it.
Just how the big fix of 1919 played out remains a subject among baseball historians to this day, and accounts differ, but the plan possibly materialized a few weeks before the World Series. So, I mean, they didn't get away with it, obviously. We're going to get to that point, but for them to have materialized, for the plan to have materialized itself before, a couple weeks before the series, I mean, that goes to show, like, it wasn't that well thought out. I mean, they got caught, so.
And at this time in baseball, it was pretty uncertain for these gamblers to try and hop into the baseball world and try and receive some inside tips and inside input from these players on games and but what happens here goes deeper than just inside tips. This is a huge story of trying to change the course of history pretty much.
Yeah.
It's way deeper than just a regular baseball game.
So, jumping into it, sometime before the events, the White Sox first base Arnold Chick Gandil and gambler Joseph Sport Sullivan met to discuss Sox players throwing the World Series. Gamblers often grease the palms of disgruntled ball players in exchange for inside tips, but attempting to rig an entire World Series was very uncommon, and it was a rarity in itself. It's never happened before, so it's very... I mean, this was a giant leap for these guys to be betting against, a World Series. Well,
And Gandil was stated that he initially was pretty skeptical about this whole entire plan working, but he in the long run ended up agreeing on what was going to go down.
Mm-hmm. And he had a few conspirators who would throw the game for a hefty payout of $100,000.
Which at that time was a lot of money. Did you get the numbers on what that would be today?
So to put it into perspective, $100,000 in 1919 in a day's time is exactly $1,522,624.24. So America's annual inflation since 1919 has increased at exactly 2.76%. So inflation rate has gone up quite a bit, and I mean that was $1 million back then, which was a lot of money.
Especially for that time of this history of the country, and baseball was way different back in that kind of time, where people nowadays 1 million's almost a minor league contract. You're getting paid that coming right out of the right off the gate, but for them back then, that's something that's pretty hard to deny, especially these people who had families and things like that. It's just you can't deny $100,000.
Yeah, because they weren't getting paid anything. Because I think you already brought up that point, but they weren't making like what ball players make today. They were barely making scraps.
Let's put it this way: I did read that the White Sox did have one of the higher payrolls, so that still shows like of how little they were getting paid for them to be one of the higher paid teams to still want to accept that kind of money.
So you can only imagine the
What
lower
the-
paid teams.
yeah.
They probably weren't making. They were probably playing for free. So I mean, you're playing for something. I mean, America's pastime. Back in 1919. I mean, it was everybody's form of entertainment. Thousands of people would come and watch people play baseball, and they made nothing. Which then again, there was merchandise, but it wasn't like in today's time. So
People would be wearing suits and not jerseys to the game back then.
yeah, so they really had nothing to make money off of. It was just greedy corporate guys and stuff making money off of it and keeping it for themselves.
All right, but going back to Gandil a little bit, he actually got a few other players involved from the White Sox. Two pitchers, one named Eddie Sickett.
Sycott.
Sycott. Okay, I didn't know that one, but then we got another nickname kind of guy, Cloud Lefty Williams. A lot of these guys had nicknames back then. Apparently, reading up on
Depending
this.
on how they played, I think Claude Lefty Williams, he was obviously a lefty.
Yeah, he was a pitcher, like I said. So, and they also brought along Charles Swede Reisberg and Oscar Happy Felsch.
Must
That's
have always
nice.
been happy, yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows? Must have always been smiling. He was happy to be in the outfield.
Also, they had a guy named by the name of Buck Weaver in on the early stages, but he eventually pulled himself out of the deal.
And utility infielder Fred McMullen was cut in after he overheard the players speaking about the deal. So, I mean, he was probably just, handling something, and he just walked in and they were talking about it. And he was just snooping, and he was like, hey, let me in on that. I want some money.
Well, if you hear something like that with money involved like that, and especially if they didn't, he probably could have got. They might have probably saw him snooping in on the situation or something like that, where they like, all right, you're here, so you have to be involved in this now.
Yeah.
So they can't just like let him walk and tell everything. That would just soil the whole plan.
But, I mean, it's his team, so it's kind of like a brotherhood probably to them. So it was like, had to jump in on that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but also there's one more player. His name has a lot of mystery around it about his involvement in this whole situation, which is Shoeless Joe Jackson, probably the most famous player out of this group. He's known for his absolute cannon of a bat, which we'll talk about a little bit about how his involvement and why it's such a mystery to this day.
So as Gandil recruited players, Sullivan and a group of gambling crooks began raising bribe money. Possible gamblers included Sleepy Bill Burns, Bill Mahang, and Abe Attell. New York's mob leader Arnold Rothstein may have been heavily involved, but there has been no substantial evidence to support such a claim. And evidence does, however, suggest Gandil and his co-conspirators may have been involved in multiple dealings with other gamblers and outside sources.
So it's Dalton said that these players not only tried to throw the series, but they were also apparently getting in as many deals wherever they could to get even more money. They were
just rack up on the money.
Yeah, just throwing around in all these different deals, and they were brought up with more than just one gambler and one deal. They were in other different situations getting even more money from different people.
So I got a quote here from gambler Abe Attell talking about the White Sox, and he said they not only sold the series, but they sold it where they could. They went anywhere and sold the odds in the game. So they were just trying to make as much money as possible because, I mean, I guess they're just trying to cash out. I guess once you're in on it like that, you might as well go all the way. So, I mean, like I said, $1 million back then, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, wherever they're hearing money, they're down for it.
Yep.
Getting into a little bit of talk about the actual beginning of the World Series and leading up to it a little bit. The original odds before the series actually started was heavily in favor of the White Sox, 3-1 actually. That was the beginning odds for them to win the World Series over the Reds at the very beginning. But But the streets began to buzz and word got around. So many started putting money on the Reds, and the odds pretty much almost flipped.
Yeah. So all of the information that he got that from was according to bookies. And if you don't know what a bookie is someone who facilitates gambling, most commonly on sporting events. So that was who was controlling all the gambling going on between the White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds.
That's the original websites like BetNL.
Yeah, like that now.
Instead of going on a website like you do nowadays, you have to actually go into like put numbers down and everything like that. So the early on, right from the jump, at the beginning of the World Series, the suspicion was out there, and it was shown that this game was being thrown early, and the series there was something that was up, because within the first few pitches, the pitcher by the name of Eddie, what'd you say?
Sykot.
Eddie Sykot hit a batter actually within the first few pitches that he threw, and he made many other blunders throughout the game, and
just uncharacteristic mistakes,
Yeah.
like just unbelievable mistakes that he would have never made any other time.
stuff these players were not known for doing. They were a solid team.
To be making them during the World Series was suspicious. I mean, maybe they should have gone about it a different way, but I mean, they were making some really suspicious moves.
If I'm not mistaken, the White Sox were actually coming off the previous World Series with a win too.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, the White Sox ended up losing game number 1, 9-1, and that left people shocked.
This led to the New York Times to state, never before in the history of America's biggest baseball spectacle has a pennant-winning club received such a disastrous drubbing in an opening game. The faulty play continued in Game 2 when Sox pitcher Lefty Williams gifted the Reds a 4-2 win after walking 3 batters in a row.
3 continuous walks.
They don't make these mistakes, so it's
uncharacteristic. You don't get the nickname Lefty Williams for being a bad pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't walk 3 guys. You just don't do it. I mean, maybe 1 walk, maybe even 2, but not 3.
The White Sox would go on to lose 2 out of the next 3 games, and they would go down in the series 4-1.
In favor for the Reds.
Yeah, in favor of the Reds. They were down 4-1. And that's the weird thing about this. Back then, the World Series were longer than they are today. It's not a 7-game series. It's a
9.
It would be a 9-game series.
So everything was proceeding as planned. Yet, according to later accounts, many of the crooked Sox players had begun to grow restless. They weren't getting paid their money. I think they had arranged to receive their bribes in like 20,000 installments.
Yeah, every loss.
Like after each loss, yeah. But the gamblers, they failed to deliver the full amount after Game 5. The ball players supposedly called off the fix once and for all and resolved to win for the rest of the series. So, I mean, they weren't getting paid from the gamblers, which that's not much of a shocker. And they just decided to, we're going to come back 4-1, which, I mean.
And that they did. They went on to win the next 2 games. That would be games number 6 and 7, I think. Yeah, 6 and 7. They went on winning those next 2 games. And I did want to state that calling off a deal with these gangsters and gamblers can prove to be pretty dangerous, and can lead to a pretty sticky situation. And it did. Several Sox players ended up getting threats from the deal, and many of those threats were actually aimed at their families.
Yeah.
So it's something you didn't want to mess with, and they definitely messed up by trying to call off this deal.
So whether because of intimidation or merely an unexpected strong opposition, the Sox went on to lose Game 8 to the Reds 10-5. So, I mean, that's a pretty big loss.
And that lost them the whole entire World Series, too.
End up losing, giving Cincinnati their first ever World Series win. So, that's kind of like speculation. You don't really know because, I mean, none of the Sox players have ever come out and said, yeah, we did lose the last one, so they would leave our families alone, but
that seems most likely.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like most likely they were.
I would be pretty scared if I was getting almost death threats, especially to my family and things like that, from guys who were known to do some pretty crazy things, probably.
Yeah, in 1919, not much. I mean, not crazy law enforcement. I mean, you could get away with a lot back then, so there's no telling. They probably honestly were just scared to death, and they were like, "We're gonna lose this. We'll let them get up a couple. We'll fight, make it look like we're trying to win, so we don't get caught." Even though we haven't been getting paid, and then we'll give it to them. And it seems like that's what they did, which, I mean, that was like, I think game number 8, I think that was the most, drastical, point game, because, The rest were like 5-4, 4-1, 3-2. Like they weren't huge.
Besides the 9-1.
Yeah, they weren't huge. So, oh yeah, there was the 9-1 game. That's right. But 10-5.
That's the only other like outlier.
That was kind of like a fight, It's halfway. Like they fought, but they lost.
I don't know the specifics of the box score either, like how, like when they scored these 10 runs or anything. So
if they scored them right off the rip, like the Braves did this year,
or they scored them all in one inning.
Yeah.
It happened to the Braves. That's so cool. Yeah, first inning. Bad memories. Let's not talk about that. Some months after the conclusion of this World Series between the Sox and the Reds, the topic of the fix still persisted as sports writers were
investigating basically the 1919 series.
Well, they were writing articles questioning baseball and its state with the gamblers being involved too. Like they were writing these articles about like how this is just such an odd thing that went down, pretty much.
Because these people weren't stupid. Everybody knew back then gamblers. They had their, they had their hands on everything. They were gambling on everything: horse racing, baseball, anything and everything. So when they, played a game and they changed drastically, it proves the point, like, hey, maybe something was going on here. This is one of the best teams.
They seem to be, like you said, the best teams. They had those heavy favors going in 3-1. You don't just get that by being just a below average team.
And it makes sense why they would have bet against themselves to make money when they weren't.
Yeah, when the odds are that crazy, you bet against the for the Reds to win. That's a lot of money in a payout.
Leading the charge was sports writer Hugh Fullerton, who investigated the 1919 series and later wrote a famous article for the New York Evening World titled, "Is Big League Baseball Being Run for Gamblers with Players in the Deal?" So, later on, Chicago White Sox owner Charles Comiskey, it was Charles Comiskey, was quickly to shrug off any reports of the impropriety, saying, "I believe my boys fought the battles of the recent World Series on the level that they, on their level," which they didn't. So,
like you said, he pretty much denied this rigging happening, and that seems to be that it was just some way to cover up his business interest, because as an account stated, he said that he may have been tipped early on in the series about this whole entire deal going down.
Yeah, was trying to protect his business interests and stuff.
Typical guy with a lot of money trying to protect his money. So the series would still go untouched with no word or no examination.
No questions.
Yep. And it
other than writers, but really nothing because no one paid attention to those guys back then.
And it wasn't brought up until 1920.
August 31st.
Okay, so August 31st of 1920, and that wasn't even about the series itself. It was them bringing up evidence that came around about another different rigging that went down in the league between the Phillies and Cubs. But this then turned to them to actually take a look at the World Series.
Yeah, a grand jury convened to investigate, and speculation soon turned to a previous year's World Series. Around the same time, gambler Bill Morag went public with an account of his own involvement in the fix. As the accusations mounted, Eddie Sicott decided to testify before the grand jury. During a tearful mea culpa, the pitcher admitted involvement in the scandal, saying, "I don't know why I did it. I needed the money. I had the wife and kids."
And that brings up a point about why a lot of these players are probably getting involved in this deal. They had wives and kids, and they just...
Well, not wives, but... Yeah.
You never know. They might have multiple.
Maybe they did.
This is 1919 we're talking about. There's some crazy things going down.
Yeah. To be gambling on World Series is pretty crazy, which, I know people do it nowadays, but not to this. They probably do, honestly, but not getting players involved because, Jesus.
Well, what I was trying to say, though, is that they had reasoning behind wanting this big amount of money. They probably had people to support, families to support, and you can't really deny that kind of money when you got a family behind you that you got to feed.
And shortly afterwards, star hitter Shoeless Joe Jackson testified and admitted to having accepted $5,000 from his teammates. Over the next few days, Lefty Williams and Oscar Felsch also confessed their involvement.
So a year after the World Series in the same month, October 1920, the now called Black Sox were indicted on 9 counts of conspiracy charges.
Gandil, Sicott, Williams, Reisberg, Felsch, McMullen, Weaver, and Jackson were the players involved on the 9 counts of indictment.
Those 8 players would end up cruising through the 1921 trial as paper records relating to the grand jury, which had
Confessions.
confessions about this whole entire case that ended up vanishing in mysterious circumstances, which is still a question to this day.
Yeah, like so all of their confessions that they had put out on what they did just disappeared. So there was really the court couldn't do anything about these players selling out baseball. They couldn't do anything about it.
Today, looking back, the most likely scenario for these papers going missing, and many have been led to believe it was gambling kingpin Arnold Rothstein that was involved in the papers going missing, to use it as a cover up and pretty much to cover himself and this whole entire deal.
Because like I said in the beginning, mob leader Rothstein, he was apparently involved, and like I said, there's no circumstantial evidence that he was involved to this day. And there's also a theory that Comiskey, the White Sox, the owner, was involved with the paper cover-up as well, or the confession cover-up as well. But, I mean, we'll never know, so.
That still seems pretty likely, because why wouldn't a guy that notorious want to find a way to get this out of here?
And try to keep his team,
But with that happening, this actually led to all the players getting found not guilty on all counts of these charges.
And there's actually a picture you can look up of the Black Sox, all of them sitting down, and they're all smiling, like they all look happy. So like they don't. These guys confessed. I mean, they told everybody what they did wrong. I mean, there's people out there. Well, there was people out there in 1920, 1921 that knew what these guys did, and these guys still got away with it. Smiling. Well, I mean, technically they got away with it on.
I'll talk about what.
Like law, like through law, they got away with it, but later on they didn't really get away with it, technically for their careers.
Which ends up bringing up the point that, like you said, they walked away with no criminal charges and no conspiracy or anything like that, but they ended up getting permanently banned from pro baseball by Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis. What a name that is. And he actually
That's Kennesaw Mountain with one N, not two.
Yeah, not the Kennesaw Mountain that we live near.
Just the Kennesaw. Yeah.
Kennesaw with so
with one
weird.
N. Yeah, I don't know.
Who
Maybe
names a kid Kennesaw?
Yeah.
Mountain.
Mountain. I don't know.
Kennesaw Mountain Landis ended up being the first commissioner of
Well,
baseball.
he was recently appointed. He wasn't the first. He was just recently appointed.
No, he was the first ever baseball commissioner.
Was he?
Yeah.
I didn't.
He was the commissioner of baseball from 1920 until he died in 1944.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
So they were really trying to take baseball.
This is
Trying to
a big
add those
stepping
politics
stone.
into baseball as fast as
Yeah.
possible.
They tried to make it a big business.
Which, I mean, it makes
eventually.
sense because, I mean, then these guys wouldn't have, get what they're about to get here in a minute.
But like we said, they were permanently banned, and they ended up trying to reinstate themselves into the league, but were denied by Kennesaw Mountain. I'm just gonna keep that name. It's just so weird. But Kennesaw Mountain Landis would ensure that they would never touch a baseball diamond again. So he was pretty set in stone about this deal and them being exiled from baseball.
Yeah. I mean, I have quotes here. I have a couple quotes here that said, regardless of the verdict of the juries, no player who throws a ball game, no player that undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player that sits in conference with a bunch of crooked players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing a game are discussed and does not promptly tell his club about it will never play professional baseball again. So this guy was serious.
He was pretty big on his morals of being legit baseball games and playing the sport the way it should be played.
And that's pretty hard because if he was the first one, I mean, he was throwing himself out there like he's slamming his foot down like.
But he survived though, 24 years. That would be 1920 to 1944. So moving on to probably the biggest mystery of this case is Shoeless Joe Jackson. He admitted to accepting the money, like $5,000 from the players that were actually involved in it. I'm pretty sure that's the exact amount. It's around $5,000. But he claimed he wasn't a participant, and he tried to tip people to the fix in this rigging that was going on. To this day, we don't really know Joe Jackson's true involvement in this case.
But an important point is that his true level of involvement, although it does remain unclear, The World Series, that was his best batting average at a
Well, it was the
.375.
best of the whole entire World Series. He had the best batting
Yeah.
average of
So I
both
mean,
teams.
but I think it was his best ever. I mean, I think he ended on his best batting average. I think he.
I
That
don't
was
know if
his.
that's I didn't see that, but you might have. I don't know. But I did see that it was the best of the World Series. That out of all the players, he had the best batting average. So it seems he wasn't. It's to be fair, it seems like he wasn't like truly
It
involved
suggests
in
that
this.
he wasn't involved in it. I mean, he
He
knew
made
about it.
he accepted the least amount of money too. He was getting money from these players, not getting money directly from the gamblers.
But Kennesaw Mountain was taking no chances. Kennesaw Mountain.
He was not playing any games. He still made sure Joe Jackson was get out of this league too. So another key part of this was Arnold Rothstein, who I believe he was one of the gamblers, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Arnold Rothstein was the mob leader. He was the guy that was never charged with any crime.
Yeah, that's what I was he's believed to have made a fortune from these deals and like made the most amount of money out of all this.
But has stayed innocent his entire life.
Yeah, and he never faced any charges for this or any backlash or anything out of this whole entire ordeal, which is pretty bad because he seemed to be the head guy for all of this happening.
If you think about it logically, in 1919, not much law. I mean, there is law enforcement, but not to the magnitude there is today. But it's like these guys knew who Arnold Rothstein was, even if he was involved, and they had circumstantial evidence, which maybe they did, but there's nothing they could have done because they know that if they would have went and messed with this big guy, he would have probably just murdered all of them, honestly.
And nobody would hear from him again.
No.
All right, but to kind of close out the actual thing, we're going to still talk about a couple extra things after this, but there's still many unanswered questions around this whole entire case about who was really participating, and there's just so many different contradictory accounts from different people that just kind of throw this off and leave a lot of mystery. So we don't really know the true case of the whole entire fixing and rigging, so it's still just a big mystery. Just to hop into a couple extra things here before we close it up. So we've been talking about how the gamblers actually initiated this whole entire thing, but there's something that's led to believe that Chick Gandil and Eddie, I still can't say his name. Psychot, okay. That they actually approached the gamblers with the idea other than the gamblers approaching them.
Which is possible. I mean, if you think about it.
They're desperate players.
Gamblers everywhere, and yeah, and if they needed money, which, I mean, I have heard the conspiracy, I guess you want to call it, around Eddie is he's the head guy. Eddie Psychot is. Well, he's one of the head guys, like, involved in it big, but struggling with his family, wasn't making ends meet. Simple, hey, we can throw the World Series, we know we can do it. We just give it to this other team, and we bet on ourselves. Boom, we make. I don't think they thought they were making $1 million, but I think they thought they were going to get paid pretty good, and then they realized, wow, we're getting paid $1 million. Yeah, let's go through with it. Let's get everyone involved, or everyone that they trusted involved. How do you feel about the treatment of shoeless Joe Jackson?
It's kind of unfair to me. I don't know how long into his career he was before this all went down, but he definitely was probably, like I said, the most notorious player out of this whole entire situation to be banned, and seems to be the most unfair too.
Granted, he confessed to taking the $5,000, but he also, like we brought up, he told people, he
told people what's going on.
Yeah, he said, look, this is what's going on, but no one listened. So, I mean, he technically did what he was supposed to do. Just because he didn't go to the right person doesn't mean he wasn't trying to do the right thing.
But I still think he, even accepting the money, should grant some kind of maybe suspension, but not
maybe a temporary ban, but I don't
not
think
permanent.
No.
Yeah.
The rest of them, yeah, permanent ban. I mean, they were involved. They wanted the money. If you're gonna take something like that and take advantage of it, granted they weren't making what they probably should have been making. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if ball players would be making $50 million now, but I mean, granted they should have been making something more at least to make ends meet since they were entertainers.
Do we know if they really ever received their full payment?
They didn't, no. Especially when they started pissing off the mobsters and the gamblers and stuff. No, they weren't getting any money, not in my opinion.
So these guys got permanently banned and walked away with nothing. So they pretty much just ruined their lives almost.
Which they probably made they probably got paid a little bit at a time, but they weren't getting paid their full $20,000. They were probably getting $1,000 maybe. Yeah, we'll get you that next week. But those guys were just pocketing everything. They were like, what are they going to do? Go tell on us? I mean, really? What are you going to do?
I said that guy made a fortune.
Arnold
Rothstein.
Rothstein.
Yeah, he made a fortune out of this.
If you steal something and then someone steals something from you, You gonna go tell a cop you stole this and someone stole it from you?
This seems like from the get-go, the gamblers knew what they were doing. They knew these players were in over water, and they had them by the necks. Just they
They
controlled
bit off
them.
way more than they could chew.
They knew they were gonna be able to find a way to finesse them and end up getting the most in the long run.
But which does point out, like, look, they had to pay them a little bit to keep them just enough interested where they would keep losing the
silent.
games. Yeah, keep them silent and keep losing the games to the point where once they made it to no point of return, which they did win those 2 games, but then they lost that last one once they started threatening. So really, I mean, that's kind of obvious right there. Like, they paid them just a little bit just to keep them satisfied, just for a little bit, so they could keep losing the games for them, so they could keep making more money. And then at the end, once they weren't giving them what they wanted and they got fed up and they started winning, they went to go, point to
That's
gun
when
their
the threats
families.
came along.
Threats came involved.
This is more of a. It's kind of just an interesting topic more than a conspiracy theory and stuff like that. This is just. There's a little bit of mystery to it, but it's just more interesting than anything.
Yeah, it's a good fun case that we just thought we'd come back in on and jump in and after Hayden took us a week off, upload. Maybe we'll do a good conspiracy video next weekend, possibly. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to. So
Probably do a real conspiracy, like something real spicy.
so yeah, something to get you guys really entertained, thinking.
So with that said, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell to know when we actually post these podcasts. But like we said, we're gonna try to keep it a schedule pretty much. You'll get this on a Monday, early in the week, Monday, Tuesday, something like that. Most likely, maybe Sunday night. Maybe able to catch it, get a quick edit done, get it Sunday night. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about this episode down below in the comment section. If you're on SoundCloud, hit the heart. You can comment on there too. Let us know what you think.
Give us some support, guys. Show us some love. We'll keep making these awesome videos for you because we're entertained. We just want you guys to be entertained, and we're working our kinks out still. I think this video was a little bit better than the last one, so
It was a lot smoother.
yeah, it's a lot smoother.
We got the mics, the computers, everything. We got it all set up and ready. Like I said, we're gonna slowly get into this, get better at it each and every week. That's our goal. It's the plan. So yeah. That all said, now I guess that concludes our episode. We're also gonna try to get this to Apple and Spotify. We're working with that. It's a little bit more difficult than just uploading to
YouTube and Spotify.
SoundCloud.
Or SoundCloud, yeah.
We also I did find a way to get it on Podbean. So if you want to watch it on Podbean, you can too. All the links and everything like that will be in the description.
Okay.
So yeah. That said, I'm Hayden from the Weekly Dive.
And I'm Clay from the Weekly Dive.
Across the table from me.
Yep, across the table.
All right.
We'll see you guys. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.